Hi, my name is Nick, and welcome to Nick's Picks, the YouTube channel where we look at watches that I would pick, I might pick, or I have picked. And today we'll be looking at a watch that I have picked, the Rolex Submariner 126610LN, and that is the stainless steel Submariner date in black with a 41mm case size. This is the new version of the watch, new version of the movement inside, and in fact, when it came out, I'll tell you what, I wasn't really that excited. I saw the new releases for 2020. I saw the, brand new Oyster Perpetual line, which was kind of nice. You had these bright colored dials, kind of remind me of the Stella dials. You saw the new release of the Submariner being hyped in the weeks before. There were rumors that it would be larger, that it would have a new movement, and that potentially there would be a blue version in stainless steel. And for me, I love watches, but I really love blue watches. I especially love watches worn by James Bond as well, and that would be kind of like the trifecta. I could get a blue watch, stainless steel, that was once worn in a way by James Bond. Obviously not the exact reference, but the same watch style, same watch in general. And so I was really hyped, and I looked at the brand new releases that came out that day, and I'm going to tell you right now, I was fairly disappointed. I already had a 116610LN. And that was the 40mm version. And you might notice by the title, it says, why I traded my grail. And in this case, I traded my grail, the 116610LN, for the 126610LN. I think that was right. I said a lot of numbers there because not the styling. A lot of people were looking at the lugs. They're like, oh, well, the lugs are changed. Not the new power reserve, although that was a factor. 70 hours power reserve, that's incredible. Neither of those really swayed me. I was happy with what I had until I realized one other change. And we'll get into that change here in a moment. But first, let's look at the specifications of this beauty and kind of compare it to the previous generation with the usual comparisons that have been made. And I'll talk to those as well. Again, for me, it wasn't the lug shape. I know a lot of people were really upset with the maxi case in the 2010s, the shape of that being more boxy, kind of like a Hummer H1, trying to drive that and have that in your driveway. It's a big boxy vehicle. It just feels like it came from that era, even though it didn't. It was a little bit later. But nonetheless, as you look at it, it didn't have that same elegance as, the original Submariner that James Bond wore, or even you look at Tudor's line now of different watches there, especially in the Black Bay line, which is primarily what Tudor's watches are, just a bunch of black bays. But if you look at the BB58, it looks like one of those vintage style Submariners. In fact, if you want a vintage watch, but without the vintage experience, get a Tudor. They're fantastic. In fact, check out Rob Reports. He reported on that last week. But anyway, it wasn't the lugs for me. I was happy having the maxi case. It was something else. But first, we're going to talk specifications. The case for this one is Oyster Steel, which is Rolex's marketing name for their stainless steel alloy that belongs to the 904L stainless steel family. Its case thickness is 12.2 millimeters, which is actually a decrease from the previous model, which was 12.4 millimeters. Case diameter is 41 in theory, but in reality, if you measure it out, it's about 40.5 millimeters. Lug to lug is 47, previously 46.6, so there is an increase in the lug to lug, but not too much. It's fractional. So if you're trying to compare between the two, trying to decide, do I go for the latest generation or, do I go somewhere where I can just pick up one of the older generations for maybe a higher price point, but I can get it today? Will it fit on the wrist? It's going to fit and feel about the same. And in fact, as you look and compare between the two generations, you really can't tell unless they're, a color that doesn't exist anymore, like the white gold with blue dial and blue bezel. That doesn't exist anymore. Now it comes with a blue bezel and black dial. Or if you look really closely, of course, you can see the coronet at the 6 o'clock. But otherwise, at a glance, you can't really tell. Inside the case, though, you would be able to tell quite a big difference. There's a new movement. This one is now powered by the 3235 automatic movement, which replaces the 3135 movement. It does feature hacking and hand winding. The new movement delivers a 70-hour power reserve, which is a huge improvement over the previous 48-hour power reserve exhibited by the 3135 movement. In terms of precision, It is a Rolex. It is a superlative chronometer officially certified as the dial declares, and so it delivers a precision of plus or minus 2 seconds per day, having been COSC certified and then certified internally after casing. The stainless steel version weighs in at 158 grams, but if you're looking to pick up one of the two-tone steel and gold Bluesies, you'll find yourself picking up a watch that weighs a lot more, 174 grams. Now, that doesn't maybe sound like a lot more, right? 158, 174, it's just like 16 grams, but when you hold it in hand, you can definitely feel that difference. And in fact, the white gold, if you were looking at the white gold Smurf there, that's 216 grams. So that is significantly more. You can feel that, but really, you do the math, there's not very much more grams, but proportionally it is. Percentage-wise, it really is. Even though it doesn't sound like that much, you can feel it. Now, one of the things I appreciate about the Bluesy this time around, the 126613LB, is that the dial text is white. Previously, it had been gold, but it wasn't a very nice, shiny, bright color of gold that would tell you, like, this is premium and amazing and high class and luxury. It was kind of this dingy gold, like someone had been trapped inside the case for 30 years, chain smoking every day until everything changed color. And it wasn't really a pleasant color of gold, in my opinion. Now, maybe you love that, and that's totally fine. It wasn't for me. And so I had actually held off on getting a Bluesy until I saw this generation, which had that bright white text. I really think that was an excellent choice. I was a little hesitant at first when I noticed that, in some of the stock photos, the crown looked like it was still stainless steel or something like that, or not still stainless steel. It looked like they had changed it. And I was happy to find that that was not the case. That was just bad lighting in the stock photos. In fact, some of the stock photos look more like renders than actual photos, but I love this dial. I really wish that they made a, all solid white gold Submariner with this dial, with no yellow gold highlights. I would love that. I would eat up a brand new Smurf with a sunburst dial versus kind of the flat lacquer dial. Although I do love the Smurf either way. I'm not saying I don't love it. I'm just saying I would love that more, and I would totally buy that. That would be amazing. Rounding out the specs, we have a sapphire crystal with an AR-coated Cyclops, and so as you kind of play with that in the light, you'll kind of notice that the Cyclops stays clear at more angles where you get these harsh reflections off the main crystal. I do actually kind of appreciate that. I wish there was some AR coating on the underside, but I understand why they might not do that. Now, one thing I do have to mention about the Cyclops is it does attract gunk and dirt and just grime, and it's really hard to clean around it. And so it might be a little unsightly in some of the macro photos and things that you might see, but here's the deal. I need it. I used to not like the Cyclops there. I used to, look at that and say, I just don't like the look of it, but I need that extra magnification now. I look at some of my other watches, I can barely read the date, or in some cases, I can't read the date at all without my glasses. And some of them, even with my glasses, it's kind of painful. So having the Cyclops there is a huge win. You're actually able to make out the date and time, even if your glasses aren't necessarily serving you very well. The winding crown is screw down. It is a Triplock winding crown, so it has an extra gasket in between the crown and the case when you unscrew it for some additional water resistance. It features a solid stainless steel case back, which I'm actually kind of glad that it does, because the movement would be a little bit of a disappointment in terms of decoration if you were to be able to see that. It is not trying to be a highly decorated, highly beautiful movement, although it is beautiful. It's well finished. It's just not highly decorated. It's not trying to show off. It's trying to be a tool, and it succeeds at doing that. But all in all, you get a water resistance of 300 meters or 1,000 feet. And as a dive watch, you'd expect that it has a dive timing complication, and it does. Of course, the bezel is a timing bezel, unidirectional, 120 clicks, and it features some interesting materials. Of course, it is a ceramic insert, a Cerachrome insert that is scratch resistant, but the numerals and graduations are coated in platinum. There's this platinum dust. You can actually see it if you really get in close on the macro. It's incredible. I'll also say that the edge, the knurled edge on the bezel, is especially grippy. So even if your hands are wet, even if you're wearing gloves, you can definitely get a grip on it, and it's very easy to turn. Now, one specification that I don't know how to capture that is definitely a part of this watch, it's a feature, this is a selling point for me, is the bezel click. I measure the bezel click of other watches by the Rolex Submariner. And so here we go. You can go ahead and listen to it. We're going to do some bezel clicking here. Pretty sure you could start your own ASMR channel of just Rolex bezel clicks. Get the warm tinglies yet? That's amazing, right? So one of the most satisfying bezel click sounds of any watch out there. And actually, you know, I was in the store looking to buy a Rolex for the very first time in my younger years. And I was comparing between, you know, different watches that were in that store. It was a Benbridge jeweler. It was a local mall shop. And I tried my first Rolex bezel in the form of the Yachtmaster bezel. And just feeling that compared to the bezel of other watches in the stores. And trying that out was a life-changing experience. I could tell, you know, this feels special. But hearing the Submariner bezel click for the first time was magical. And I know that is the most ridiculous thing you've probably heard today. Or maybe you're saying, yes, we know this magic. It is so true. Now let's talk about Lume. The Rolex Submariner, the indices, all of them feature Chromalight Lume. Now this is a newer style blue lume. If you've been familiar with the tritium lume, and then later on they had the green lume that was happening. This is the blue Chromalight, and it is very bright. It is very, very long lasting. It can last through the night if you hit it with a UV torch or something like that right before bed. And it's gorgeous. I actually use this. I set the bezel to the time I want to wake up by the hour. So I set it to the hour I want to wake up. And if I wake up in the middle of the night and I look and I see the hour hand hasn't quite reached the bezel marker, I know I can go back to sleep. And I can see it enough through the night to know that that's going to happen. So I have to give it props for the Lume. It just knocks it out of the park. Really, only my Pelagos can match that or exceed it. Actually, technically, the Pelagos exceeds it by far. But it is gorgeous Lume. I love the color. All right, and as we flip it over, you can see that on the other side, you have that larger case, of course, and with that larger case comes a larger lug width, and with the larger lug width comes a larger bracelet with not quite as much taper once it gets to the clasp. You'll notice the clasp is actually noticeably larger. And so as I've been wearing my new Submariner versus my previous generation Submariner, I have noticed that. Now, it does feel more tool watchy. It does feel like my my Pelagos, actually. It feels a lot like that in terms of the size of the clasp. It actually feels a lot like my Seamaster as well in terms of the size of the clasp. So I am kind of used to that. Both of those don't really have much taper, but I do like that elegance of that additional taper from the previous generation, even though I wouldn't complain about the same as much for the lugs. I didn't really mind the maxi case so much. Now, the clasp on the Submariner, in my opinion, is one of the best clasps in the industry, even though as you look at it, it doesn't really look like much. It has, the traditional dual retention. It's a milled clasp on the inside, so very nicely machined. And of course, it is engraved with their logo and, Geneva and Swiss made and all that goodness there. So it looks kind of nice on the inside. Of course, it's all smudged up at this point, but the magic happens where you want to actually change the size of the bracelet without having to use a tool, right? So you're maybe used to traditional dive extension, things like that. So you can actually flip up or pull down on the back part of the clasp. You get that in focus here. And you can actually then slide the bracelet either smaller or longer. So you can actually bring it all the way to the point where you basically have more or less a link and a half in the clasp at that point that's concealed and now shortened. So it can fit a different size wrist, or maybe it can fit back on your wrist after having previously fit over a wetsuit. So it is a pretty significant difference in size. Now, the links do hide out behind this. So let me see if I can show you that here. So you can see the links kind of hiding back behind the clasp inside of it. And they do tuck very flush behind it so that it's not going to get in your way. You're not going to notice it. You're not going to feel it. It just goes on your wrist like nothing happened. And it is a significant adjustment. Like I said, it's basically a link and a half as you look at it. So if you're saying, it's just for one of those warm days, it's a small, no, it's actually a huge adjustment. It's fairly significant. If you're used to the Easy Link system, you'll have a treat in this. So why did I give up my Grail if these watches are so similar in appearance? Yes, the movements are different. They have, the new one has a longer power reserve, but you told me it's not that. We look at the case looks more elegant in theory, but that's subjective and you're saying it's not that. So what is it? Well, in my case, it comes back to the fact that I'm a drummer. And sometimes you never know when you're about to drum. Case in point, in 2012, I had the opportunity to play at the House of Blues down in Orlando. And I took that opportunity, as you can see here. when it's going to happen, and you want to be prepared. I want my everyday watch to be able to handle the stresses of everyday life, including shock. And I noticed that there was some innovation in that space in the early 2000s. It involved a brand new shock system that had been patented called Paraflex. Now, the Paraflex shock system not only is going to provide better shock resistance, 50% more shock resistance, but it can be installed in either direction. It can be installed upside down or right side up because it's so flat, it doesn't really matter which side. And the design of the shape of that actually tells the watchmakers how much lubrication is needed, or they can really visually spot check and see, does it have too much oil, not enough oil, because it shows kind of the minimum and maximum just in its shape. And when they patented it, they actually had a few different designs they submitted, and they said, hey, we prefer this one because it has that additional attribute. Even when it fails, even when, you know, it receives the largest possible shock it can, all that's going to happen is it will bend the spring. So it won't be in, you know, optimal condition, but your balance staff should be okay. Your pivots on the balance should be okay, in theory. Now, of course, there are certain shocks you could deliver to it that would completely disintegrate and pulverize the watch, but within reason, there's going to be larger problems in that case. But it does deliver excellent shock protection. And in fact, right after that came out, you know, the Swatch group, they got on board. They're like, all right, let's look at the shock system. Now, to their credit, if we look at, you know, other brands out there, it's not just Rolex that's been leading and paving the way there. Breguet was the very first on the scene with shock protection in their parachute system is what they called it, which I thought was a pretty cool name. This is the Paraflex system. I don't know if they're playing on that or not, but actually Omega ended up taking one of the latest innovations out of that work that the Swatch group was doing called Neva Shock, and they put that in their Seamaster line. And so that's actually what's in the Seamaster 300M that gives it 5,000 Gs of shock resistance, which is pretty intense as well. But having 50% more protection for my Submariner was something I said, you know, that's going to push me over the line. I do have a lifestyle that is going to potentially subject this to shock. Now, I'm not going to try to. I'm not going to be like, how much shock can I deliver to my watch? But I want to know that it can. I want to know that it can handle a little bit more, especially if we look at the previous system. The previous system hadn't really been innovated since the 1930s. And yes, I know that these are anachronisms on our wrists, and they're not necessarily going to have the latest, greatest technology, but I do appreciate that Rolex is kind of pushing the barriers there. So all in all, the Rolex Submariner 126610LN is a fantastic watch that's going to deliver not only a tool watch with Rolex's latest engineering, but also an elegant case shape with, you know, high polished case sides still, with a high polish glossy dial, with premium materials, platinum and gold in the mix, with hands that are not just flat and bare, but are nicely rounded in shape. So it has some elegance still, in addition to being a tool watch that really can still be used as a tool if you need it to be. Comes in a variety of different case materials as well. So if you wanted to really step it up, you can. Or if you just want it to be what it always has been, you can do that as well. I do respect this watch for what it is. It is probably one of the most iconic watches on the planet. You can wear it dressed up, dressed down, dressed any way you'd like, because apparently James Bond gave us all permission to do that by wearing it in those ways. Wearing it with a diving suit, followed immediately by a cocktail suit, and using it to time a dive and then time the detonation of a bomb. Probably don't want to use it to do that, honestly. You should not be violent in life if you can avoid that. So probably don't look up to all aspects of James Bond, but at least for the style aspects, for some of it, I think it's going to be okay. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on Nick's Picks Watch Reviews. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it, and until next time, take care. If you like this episode, please be sure to subscribe to both this channel and the About Time channel, give this video a like, and hit that notification bell to be notified about future episodes. Might be getting carried away.